This is part 2 of the rocket lamp here, and I've made a couple of small changes. What I did is I narrowed the bulb, the large bulb down here, so I could put it in some kind of like a receptacle or socket or whatever. So I did that, and I can't remember what else I did. I guess I did a little bit of work on the stand. As you can see here, I just created this to make it look a little bit more steampunk, and I think I angled that. So I'm going to get rid of that for the time being. And of course, I've got the rocket standing up. It's a little bit easier to do. Now, I also created some filaments, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. And I've gone ahead and I've unwrapped this, but I'm just going to talk to you a bit about that. Before I do that, I put everything in collections, and I've created materials. Now, each material will get its own UV map. So I certainly didn't want to do it all on one UV map because the textile density won't be very good, or the resolution. So I've got this, you can see I've named it cage, and this is cage. And together, those things are here. Now, some of this, I unwrapped it. Okay, so you can see I've got some seams on here. So for this thing, for the cage part that comes down, I just basically did the outside, and I guess I did the two corners here. You know, usually when I do a bevel with 3 edges, I usually grab the middle one. So I did that, and for these cylindrical pieces here, actually I'm missing a little bit of the cage, aren't I? I really should do it this way. I'll select it and then I'll do it that way. Yeah, I was missing that stuff there. So we'll come back in. For these cylinder pieces, I just did the top face and the bottom face and a cut at the back for all of them. I think I may have done one and then recopy them around. For these cylinder pieces that go around, I think I just cut it open here. But you'll also see so I've got a bevel of 3, so I'm in the middle, but I also cut it here. Otherwise, it's very, very long and thin. So I did that. And for this piece here, okay, you can see, usually if I've got a solid face like this, I won't go to the middle one. I'll go right to the edge there. Because when I put this cut in, or that seam, it'll go right to there. And then sometimes I just sort of arbitrarily cut it in the middle there, and when it sort of changes, and then I skip a couple changes in angle, and say I'm going to cut it there. And then of course this one had a circle. Some people just merge it all in the center. I don't particularly like that. So I put a seam there. So there's the cage, all right? Let's go on and let's just look at the bulb real quick. Okay, so for the bulb, all I did was, this was a UV sphere. I actually changed it from, like I said, merging at the center point. I don't like unwrapping that very much. So I made that just a face so I could do a seam there and a seam. This is in the back of the bulb, just all the way down. And that's all I did for that. Okay, and that's what you get. There's the top little piece, which doesn't have to be big. And this. Now, the only thing I should say is I often straighten the UVs. And I've talked about this before. I'm using this add-on called UV Squares. And I forget how much it costs. It might have been 25 bucks or 17 bucks. And pretty much all I ever use is this to grid by shape. But it's just really quick in straightening UVs, which is not always necessary. But in order to pack things in well, this one's not a great example because there's not much going on. But if you wanted to add text or something and you need a nice straight UV. So, I mean, I highly recommend that. I don't use too many add-ons other than that. And so this is this is called bulb large. These ones, I did one and then I copied it around. So as you can see, I cut it pretty much right where it ends. And then I did one straight through, but I also made sure that this wasn't coming to a point, that it was like that. And then I straightened the UVs, and then I just copied it around. You know, so I had 4 of them. So that's another one. That's bulb small. Then I have something called engine. That's all these are the same. I really unwrapped one and then I copied it again. So the UVs are essentially would be like repeats or on top of each other. And here's what I did for this. For these particular bolts, I wanted to do this and then just unwrap them. I just pressed U unwrap. For this thing, I almost always do the same way. If I've got a large face, I often will put a seam right there, so that when I, do a control, what is it, shift and alt, whatever, shift and alt to select that edge, right? Shift and alt and mark seam. It'll go from there right to that point. So that's how I did this piece. And then this is just like a pipe. So what I did is I said, you know what, I'm going to cut at a couple of spots. So I chose there, and I chose, some of these edges, and then I just, shift alt and click and went all the way down. And then I shift alt and click here, and shift alt and click here. It goes all the way down to there. All right. So I mean, you can pause it if you want to take some screenshots for where I did it. And then a lot of these things were curved, and I straightened them. All right, and packed them. So these are all the same. For this thing, what did I do? I just put some edge loops here and there, and then I left the UV sphere alone, just unwrap, and then it's so small. And then this thing, I just right at the top, circle, and an edge down there. And then these things are pretty straightforward. Okay, I've got a seam there, and I've got a seam at the bottom, and I could probably do without some of those seams. And then over on the back. All right, anyhow, it's UV unwrapped. I have saved an FBX of this. There are a couple of other things. There is the stand, there is the filaments. Let's come to that a little bit later on. So I'm going to jump over to Substance Painter, and here is the rocket lamp in there without the stand and without the filaments. And what you can see over here in my texture set list is I have all of the materials that I created in Blender. So if I hide that, see, that's the engine. There's the whole cage. Of course, the shadow is created when you bake the mesh maps, and that's on there as there's some ambient occlusion on there, which may or may not be what you want. There's a way to turn that off, but anyways. So I have all of the materials as texture sets here, and that does make it a little bit more difficult, because if I want the same materials on, say, the cage and the engine and the body, I have to do some copying, or I have to have it as a smart material. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the body itself. I have no layers in here. What I'm really going to be doing is using a smart material that I've already got. However, I'm going to show you a similar material that you could make. So you could take any metal. Now, I happen to have this aluminum, and I've been told that other people don't have it in their version. So you can search, the materials or the smart materials for any metal. For example, this iron grainy I just found. That's a pretty good one. In fact, maybe we'll use that. Iron grainy, just drag it in. I often want it a little bit darker, and sometimes I want it a little bit less rough. So there we go with that. And then you would want some dirt on top of that. So I'm going to drag the roughness up, and I'll use dark brown or almost black on there. I'll use the dirt generator, and then we'll dial it back. We'll see how that looks. Okay, that's too much, but you bring it back, and you've got some of that kind of look. That's great. I love the ambient occlusion type look, and the dirt in there and around all these crevices, whatever. So that's dirt. You could add another layer with scratches. I'll use color and height. I usually like to make my scratches dark, but let's drop the height just a little bit at first. A lot of black mask and a fill. And in here we'll search for scratches, and I often will use this last one, and that's too much, so just dial it back and maybe change the width, make it narrower. You can randomize this, of course. I am only at 1024 for my size. If I bring that up, the scratches will likely become more evident, but I think that looks pretty cool. And that's basically how I would do this. You can do a roughness variation, a color variation, but what I really want to do is delete all these and come back to my smart materials and search for metal robot. I used this material previously. Now I've got a couple of them, slight differences, but let's just drop that in there, and that's a little bit more grainy. I'm just going to go down to 1024. All right, it's a little bit more grainy, and I can come in here and try to reduce that a little bit. There's one there. And let's see if I can get this to one there. But I do like the grainy look. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. I just made a couple changes. I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to put it on the engine. Let's see how that looks. That's on there. Now, based on the way this is unwrapped, the grain is less visible on this. And you could come back in. I realize you don't have this smart material. You could start trying to bring it back. But I actually like it a little bit different on those. So I'm basically going to leave that. So I've got that on there. And I want that also on the cage. Okay, and that includes the top. And that's the metal stuff. Now the dirt and stuff is already in the smart material, but like I just showed you how you could add it. Okay, so there's my metal. And on the body, no, on the bulb large, in addition to glass, I also have this receptacle area. So I'm going to switch over to the bulb large, and I'm going to go to my smart materials and search for glass. And I decided I'm going to use this glass visor. I think that comes with Substance Painter, but if not, you could search Substance Share for any glass, or you could make glass. I'm going to drag that in, and right now it's just kind of bluish and reflective, and it's also on this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my shader settings, and it's on PBR Metal Rough. For this, I'm going to switch to PBR Metal Rough with Alpha Blending. That hasn't changed much yet because I need to come over here to my channels and add an opacity. So I'm going to click the plus and choose opacity. And now there's a little bit of transparency on there. You can see back through that. Okay, so I've got that in there. And I think I'll probably go with something like that for that piece. Okay, so let's just, maybe we'll just copy that, and we'll come down to the bulb small, and we'll paste that in. So that'll put the glass there, but I need to make sure I've got that, and I need to make sure I've got opacity in there, which I don't. So there we go. That's basically what I need. Okay, so what I'll do is let's export that stuff, all of these. So I'm going to come over to export textures, and if I look at my output templates, this PBR metallic roughness, I don't seem to have right now anything with opacity. I did before, it's not saving it. So let's fix that up. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to get rid of this $ mesh stuff. I don't need that on there. I'm just leaving the $ texture set. I just want the name of my textures and that. So I'm going to do that. Now I have emissive. I don't really need it, but that's fine. But what I don't have is I don't have opacity. And I also want to check my normal. You see my normal says DirectX. I'm going to drag OpenGL up here and choose RGB. So now I'm going to have it in OpenGL for Blender. So I'm going to create a gray channel right down there. I'm going to copy this sort of name stuff in there, and I'm going to call this opacity. Okay, and I'm going to take opacity here. I'm going to drag it in and choose gray channel, and now I have the opacity that I can export, and that's on the PBR metallic roughness. So I'm going to come over here and choose PBR metallic roughness. I'm going to leave it at 8 bits. It's okay. Export. I'm only at 1024, I think, for everything. But here you can see all of the textures. And let's come back to Blender and see how things go. Let's go to the shading tab, and I'm going to click on the body. Shift Control T. Textures Rocket Lamp. No, this is Textures Rocket Lamp Video. Okay, this is body. Base color to roughness. And it's on there. Okay, so that's body. Let's go to engine. So I already had these materials pre-made, so now I'm just loading them. Let's scroll down to engine, base color to roughness. Good, they're coming on. Let's do cage. Base color to roughness. Okay, all the stuff that's cage is going good. Okay, so let's do the bulbs now. This is bulb small. Okay, base color through roughness. There is opacity. We're going to deal with that in a second. Let's just put that on, and on the bulb large, let's put that on. Base color to roughness as well. Okay, so far so good. This is how it's looking. Do we have a problem here? We may have a problem. Let me go back. All right, so here is what we have so far, but we're going to do some work on this glass. If I come over here, you'll notice that I've switched this from opaque to alpha blend. I also have backface culling on, show backface, screen space, refraction. Okay, but we're not quite done with that. So I'm going to control spacebar. I'm not going to be using cycles, so I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to, I think I'll just take that G and drag it up here. It's already connected here. And I want to, I'll change the name of this though, from displacement to opacity. And I'm going to use that for the opacity map. So pulling out this, Shift A, shader, mix shader, drop that in there, and another shader transparent, oops, shader transparent. I'm going to put that in there, and then this is going to connect to here, and let's just have a look at that. Give it a second, and I'm going to switch this to RGB, and there I have my glass there. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. So once again, I'm going to delete the displacement. I'm going to drag this up. I'm not going to bother to change the name, but I'll do the same thing. Mix shader, transparent. I'll set this to RGB. And let me make sure, by the way, that I actually choose the right thing. I don't think I did that in the other one. Did I forget? Yeah, okay, I think I may have. I may have not put in the right map. Yeah, I've got the height. This is bulb large opacity. That's better. So I got those in there. All right, so here's what I've got. I've added a couple of alphas on here, just to give it a bit more of an effect. And I added a couple of little sort of circles on there as well. Okay, and change the color of the glass a little bit, just to suit my purposes more. I wanted to show you now with the bulb filaments, which I've done this. All right, so I just did a coil in here. I did this in Blender. I'll show you how I did that in a minute. And I did another thicker coil, and I did sort of like a thing of like Saturn. All right, and so what I'm going to do just for the moment is shut that off, and I'm going to tilt the rocket. So I'm going to hide all this, and then I'll talk to you about those filaments in a second. I'm just going to hide that. I'm going to select this. I'm just going to go back to global, and I'm going to rotate 45, and I can bring back the stand, and I can adjust this a little bit. Let's see. There we go. I think we got it. I think we got it. And here's what it looks like. Okay, so I just didn't show you how I created the filaments, which I'll do in a second, and just putting some alphas on, and you know, I've done that so much in other videos. I'm just going to hide this stuff now to show you how I made the filaments. I'm going to bring in a plane, And I'm just going to merge actually at center, pull this out a little bit. I'm going to add a screw modifier, and I'll increase the iterations a bit and start pulling this up. Alright, so there you can see how I'm creating a spiral-like thing there. And what I did was, once I had it the way I liked it, I would just apply that, and I can do a simple deform taper and just find the axis that I want. And I think I wanted it sort of like, you know, you could do it anyway. I'll do it this way. I'll taper it in like that. I'm going to apply that, and I will, let's convert it to a curve. Give it a little bit of thickness there. Shade smooth. You can add a subdivision if you need. And on top of that, I will add this emission from Blender. Just move it there. And there you've got that spiral thing. So hopefully I went through that okay with you, from the unwrapping to the texturing, just leaving off a couple of things and then adding an emission to that coil. And that is the Steampunk Rocket Lamp. Thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you again soon.